this a better place for you. Oh, you're there. Hi.
Hello. Are you okay? Are you feeling a little grumpy?
No. I'm feeling a little upset. And, look, people come here to hear about cars. But I feel like...
Have you seen the GT3 RS that has been circulating the interwebs that was destroyed in Los Angeles in the riot? I've seen a lot of people angry about that.
They're angry about...
They're angry about the GT3, yes.
Why couldn't they have burned a different car? Is that like the...
It's the senseless destruction of property that people are angry about. They were angry about the senseless destruction of a Mercedes dealer also.
That is senseless. Except that... And we'll get political for 1 second, and then I'll shut right the fuck up, because, this is probably what I should do anyway. If, there was a great speech by Van Jones, and he said, angry, I think it was, hurt people holler. And, when you have something to say and no one's listening, the way you communicate and your actions tend to get louder and louder and louder until you're heard. And I am 100% behind you that there's no reason to destroy property right now. On the other hand,
there's no reason to destroy human lives either.
Right. And if people aren't listening about that, well then, I certainly don't condone destroying property, but I get it. I get it. We're in a time where no one's listening, and we can't.
I mean, Van Jones said that because MLK said that a riot is the language of the unheard.
Right. And how else are you going to get heard when no one's listening?
Now there are people talking about it who would not otherwise be, because they're talking about the destruction of GT3 RSs and Mercedes dealers. I guess there are people. It started a conversation for those people who otherwise wouldn't be talking. I just hope that if someone's upset about the destruction of those two physical objects, that they are equally, if not more, upset about the destruction of human lives.
I would hope that's the case.
As a person who is part black.
I can't figure out what the hell you are, and I think you should probably just keep that a mystery from the world, just so everyone can try to guess what the hell Derek
I just outed myself. Okay, so now that we're having the end of times, I think that's a fine time to transition to today's topic, which I'm going to vote should be like vehicles to survive the apocalypse.
Ooh, I like what you did there. Fair enough. Bring it back to cars. Appropriate timing. Very good. Very good. Very good.
Look at that, like 2 minutes on the soapbox.
So, yeah, a little more than that. But hey, hopefully we didn't offend everyone. Anyway, vehicles to survive the apocalypse. I like this. I'm going to write, I don't know what your qualifications are. I don't know if it's like actually like getting out of the middle of a riot without being lit on fire, but I'm going to say Mercedes W123 Wagon diesel.
Yeah. I think that's a good one because it's the thing that they continue to survive to like 400 trillion miles.
They're the official vehicle of the cockroach.
It's funny, like at the end of the nuclear apocalypse, there will be cockroaches left and 123s. Yeah. Maybe being driven by cockroaches.
There's a 123 Wagon that just sold on Bring a Trailer, and I didn't look at the auction, but we know the car. It's a local sort of Bay Area car. Did you see that?
Oh, the burgundy one that sold for like $30,000 and has like 250,000 miles, which is literally farther than it is to the moon.
Yeah, I love that. I was like, oh yeah, I'm not really surprised at that. Like a beautiful 123 Euro. I think it was Euro. I didn't even look.
Yes, it is Euro. Or if not Euro converted, then.
Yeah, I'm like, it was a beautiful wagon. I've seen it at Cars and Coffees. Like, it doesn't surprise me that it fetched like all this money. And then I look at the headline on Bring a Trailer, and it's like, how many miles? Like, this has got to be the highest price per mileage car in the history of the world. What other, like in terms of, let's put it this way, in terms of its original sales price, dollars per original sales price adjusted for modern sales price, what other car could be sold for multiples of its original sale price with 250,000 miles on it?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Well, I would say for some cars that have 5-digit odometers, like, it kind of doesn't matter. Like, I had a 912, which it had service records back to new. It was a 1968 Porsche 912, and I got a big stack of records with it. And I started going through the records and tracking the mileage, and then I was like, oh my god, this thing has 350,000 miles on it.
Seriously?
And like, it was a nice car. It was one of the nicer ones. I owned probably a dozen 912s over the years, and it was one of the nicer 912s that I owned. But I didn't know the mileage when I bought it. I found out afterwards when I was going through the paperwork. But I don't think it really affects the value. I mean, I would say that if that car were like a valuable Porsche instead of a valueless Porsche, or I don't know, they're less valueless now. Those things used to be like $5,000 or $10,000. But if it were like a 356 SC with a sunroof or a cabriolet, which is, you know, beautifully restored as $150,000 at least type of car, if it had 350,000 miles and was restored, it wouldn't be worth really anything different from a car that had 68,000 miles from new. But also it's fully restored, so mileage is kind of irrelevant. I also, did you see this week or last week circulating, there was a Lamborghini Huracan that had been rented out, and it had, you didn't see this?
No.
187,000 miles on it.
Oh my, on a Huracan, so it can't even be that old.
Yeah, it's like less than 5 years old.
Oh my God. I guess, all right, so 35, 40,000 miles a year. So anyone who rented that thing drove it. Wow.
Yes.
That's cool. What did it sell for? Anything good?
I don't know that it sold. I just saw it advertised. I think it was like $135,000 or something like that. I don't know. I don't know. It just seemed like a lot of money for a grenade. You're basically like, I would like to buy this, and then it can explode in my face.
Here's the thing about that Huracan motor. It's an Audi engine, so it's probably, you know, there's a lot of components that are probably much more robust than, say, like, you know, a 200,000 mile Countach would be, for example.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
But they're you know what made me laugh is years ago, you and I, you were selling, and I came to test drive a Ferrari 308 GT4 with 218,000 miles on it.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And I was so impressed that someone had put 250,000 miles on a 308 GT4.
Yes. One guy, basically.
Yeah.
And he bought it when it was 5 years old. It was sitting on the showroom floor at a Buick dealer. And he bought it when it was 4 or 5 years old, because the guy who bought it new just put it on his Buick dealer, I guess, to attract attention. It was like this weird kind of brownish gold color.
Yeah. Brown with like velour interior. I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Except it caught, you used the best. I said, well, I think it caught fire. And you're like, no, it caught smoke.
Yeah, it did sort of smoke a bit while it was underway. Yeah. But then it stopped and it was fine. And we sold it to someone else who made it almost all the way home before it broke. To Portland, which is a distance. I mean,
it's
that's
a long
like
drive,
that's a 10-hour drive, and he made it within 50 miles of home. So I would consider that to be a very good car.
If it's within one Haggerty tow of home, that counts.
That's a good way of making it home.
Well, especially on a 1,000-mile trip, right? I mean,
yeah, we sold it to the guy who started the Sports Car Market, which is a magazine, Keith Martin. Yes,
Keith Martin. Sorry, there's a Keith Crane and there's a Keith Martin. Both in the magazine.
And then he sold it on Bring a Trailer subsequently, so the car is kicking around. Anyway, yeah. And then there's like a guy that's kind of local in the Bay Area who has a Testarossa with 250,000 miles on it, but he has also like serviced the hell out of it. Not good apocalypse cars, right? Because they need a lot of love to keep them going that long.
You can't stop and do an engine out timing belt service in the middle
when there are zombies chasing you.
Being chased by zombies.
Could you guys all hold for like 3 weeks or so while we get the tensioners and stuff?
Does that mean that automatically any car with a timing belt is exempt from zombie car status? Like zombie apocalypse car status? You
need the 5 year and 30,000 mile interval. So as long as it has a fresh belt service, even if it's like, you know, a Honda, right, I think it's okay. I don't know. How long does an apocalypse last for?
I don't know. But there's got to be clearly some cars, any car with a belt has a diminishing like
utility as a zombie apocalypse vehicle.
Yeah, quotient, exactly. I mean, because, you know, the Hondas are 90,000 mile belts or 110,000 mile belts. I think that's most of them. But that's an interesting concept, because actually one of my zombie apocalypse vehicles would be either a Suzuki Sidekick or a Suzuki Samurai. Like the Samurai is so little and so narrow that it's like a billy goat. It just goes wherever it wants. But the Sidekicks are a lot wider, so they can't like fit down sidewalks. But they actually can go around a corner without, like, at higher than walking speed without immediately rolling over. So I don't know, there's a kind of a trade-off there, but they're both timing belt cars. Like in the 16 valves,
you might have interference. You might have to reconsider. Yeah, you want something that can run on gasoline or like whatever you happen to find in a ditch by the side of the road. Yeah, I mean, that would be ideal. That's the nice thing about diesels, because you could put like jet fuel in it. And,
hairspray.
Yeah, a variety
cheap
of
vodka.
So maybe a 123. But if the genre of the apocalypse is such that you need to go over some terrain, then maybe you need like a Mercedes G with a diesel engine or a Land Rover Defender. I'm sorry, I couldn't even finish saying that without laughing because
well, the joke
I know
is
that
it's going to break down before you get to the end of your driveway. The zombies are going to be like chasing you, and you'll get 6 feet and be like, right, excuse me, had a bit of electrical failure. Could you do me a favor and just hold off for a second? Of course, the zombies do.
And I mean, it's also so slow that the zombies would really need to be like of the like easy.
They would out-crawl it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we both drove one recently, and I clocked it at, was it 28 seconds to 60? We orchestrating a 0 to 50 mile an hour drag race between the two slowest cars ever. 3, 2, 1, go! That's kilometers. Oh, look at that smoke. Still going. We're at 50 kilometers, 30 miles an hour. Still going. Oh! Fuck you! We got to like, I don't know, 65K. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. We the winners. I don't think I made it to 60.
Did you get to 60?
No, I don't think I did.
I did.
What the hell were we racing? We were both in incredibly slow cars.
The Fiat 500.
Fiat 500. Like an original, like 12 horsepower.
Yeah, I think it's actually 18 horsepower.
That's a to make, but yes. I was making up a number.
I mean, that's a 50% increase from 12 to 18 horsepower.
That's true.
It's a substantial power increase.
That is
and
true.
then you could get the hot-rodded Abarth version, which had a whopping 34 horsepower.
That's a huge difference.
I mean, as a percentage, it is massive. We actually have one for sale in Europe right now. It's a 3-owner car with like paperwork back to new, which is a phrase that like I find myself saying with some regularity because you say it about like Porsches or Ferraris and stuff. But to say it about a Fiat from the 60s is pretty unusual because most of those are like had 900 people who owned them who were like, I bought it for 75 cents and a pack of cigarettes on a street corner in the middle of the night when I was drunk or something like that.
And then sold it 3 weeks later.
Yes.
And there was owner 60.
When it ran out of gas and I couldn't afford to put any fuel in it, so I traded it for
it ran out of gas. It ran out of gas, so its subsequent value was 0. Yeah, I kind of think if I had to, like genuinely, if I had to have one car that would get me out of real trouble, like a G-Class diesel is slow as shit, but I feel like like a G300D with a 3-liter 5-cylinder would be faster than.
Well, so they made a diesel one that was kind of snappy, actually. I mean, snappy being relative term. I had just driven the Defender, to be fair.
That Defender.
Very slow, yes.
What's top speed, 62, 63?
I saw 70 in it.
What hill did you fall off of?
It did take much of the way of a 30-mile drive to achieve 70, but I did do it.
It's got it. I mean, I kind of love cars that are that slow because they reset your, like, I got out of a 9.5-second Civic or something, and I'm like, this thing is so slow. Well, yeah, really? Get into a 35-second Land Rover.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is, for me, it's impossible to road rage in that car. Right, because no matter if you drive it flat out, it's not going to make a difference how fast you go, and so you find yourself just not driving it flat out because there's literally no difference.
So that's an interesting thing. I once had a 200D, which is a 240D with a Euro 2-liter in it.
This is a 123.
A 123, 4-speed manual with air conditioning on. It did 66. With air conditioning off, it did 59 or 60.
You mean other way around?
Other way around, yeah.
At the crack of noon.
It's 1:15. No, and I thought initially like it would be an anti-road rage machine, and for the most part it was, because what are you going to do? Like, so you're in a school zone, floored, and someone cuts you off. Really, you're not going to catch them, and I mean someone as in like a kid in a stroller. like everything was faster than you. The problem would come in is you took 3.5 miles to get to 60 miles an hour, and you're so proud of yourself that you're doing 60.
Yes, and then someone interferes and you have to use the brakes, and you're like, oh my god, I've just wasted 3 minutes.
Now it's going to take me 3 minutes to get back up to 60 from 57. you know. So it's like it's road rage. It's the most pathetic road rage in the world. Like you can't actually do anything about it, but it can be very frustrating.
The literal definition of powerlessness.
Totally froze up on me for a second, so I have no idea what you just said.
I said the literal definition of powerlessness.
Yes, exactly, literally.
What I was starting to say was I did drive one diesel G-Class that was kind of fast. Kind of fast. I mean, it was compared to the Land Rover, it was fast, and it was like serviceable to drive on the highway, and it was quite usable. And evidently what they did is the 324-valve, 6-cylinder turbocharged diesel from like the late 90s, like 97, 98. It's the 300 diesel engine from like a W210 that came to the US. Anyway, I drove a G with one of those motors, and it was actually like, oh, I could own this. Whereas with the Land Rover, I was like, I could not own this.
Isn't that the one Mercedes diesel that had all kinds of issues? Like I thought, if memory serves, there was the 140 diesel was a disaster. Like they had head gasket issues. Now,
that was a 5-cylinder. That was a 3.5 liter, not a 3 liter.
Okay.
So I hope it's not the same motor, because I kind of was like, oh, I could get into this, because normally I'm like, I would really like the one with 450 horsepower, 469 horsepower, the supercharged 50.
I go back and forth on this. Like, I love G-Classes, and I kind of love power, and I love throbbing V8 noises and all that other shit. But every time I drive a G, like a last generation, like the original G AMG.
The first generation.
Yeah, the one that went from like 1843 till 2000 something. I'm always thinking, like, this is just too much power. It's too much of a temptation. Like, from a stop to 5 seconds later, you're in the danger zone. Like, it's just too easy to go too fast.
Well, because the car is unbalanced, and by unbalanced I mean that if you look at a spiderweb chart, like the power and acceleration is really strong, and everything else is kind of small and like not super great chassis or brakes, and so I mean that's not really the fundamental purpose of any truck, in my opinion. Except
that when you put 500 horsepower in a truck, you tend to create temptation. And I will say, I did one thing with Motor Trend where we had a Viper and a Corvette, and our chase vehicle was a G63. And I somehow wound up in the G63 on this insane mountain pass that went on for like 30 miles. And the guys lost me, but not by much. Like, I was never more than 2 corners behind them because the thing was just so friggin' fast in a straight line, and I could slide it around everywhere. And actually, they're okay. But
really,
yeah, you'd be surprised what a G will actually do. Here's the thing.
I assumed it handled like a shed.
Oh, worse. Oh, way worse. But we're at a point in the development of the automobile that what all these cars can do is so much more than you would do. And even though the Corvette and the Viper were just so like orders of magnitude more capable than the G, and certainly more safe at doing that, there was just a speed at which the guys wouldn't go any faster because there's not sight lines, or no one's doing like there's all these heroic stories of, oh, I hit 160 miles an hour on a back road. That's the dumbest thing you could ever do. There's nothing to be gained by really going that fast. So the people that that I tend to be driving with, they're not going to go triple digits in between corners just because the car can do it for a split second. So I could in the G, like I could catch up with them if I needed to sort of close the gap. They back off at a reasonable speed, and then just have to keep my foot in it for another second or two before braking. The brakes were completely done by the bottom of this mountain, and I mean the rotors were glazed, and they just looked like shit. They worked fine. They're big, massive AMG brakes. So
yeah, I mean, but you were literally trying to stop something that weighed as much as the
moon. Both of those cars combined, almost. I mean, so the thing is, it just tempts afterwards. I'm like, what is wrong with me? Like, why did I do that? But it was so much fun. So. But that's why I think, like, if I had a G, maybe a diesel, like a snappy, to use your term, a snappy diesel might be the right solution, because you're not going to be doing 100 miles an hour in between corners. One of those. Ever.
So again, with these military-derived SUVs, don't you have like kind of a fondness for the Wrangler also, don't you?
I do. I have a fondness for cars that are unabashedly, unapologetically what they are.
Authentic.
So, authentic. I mean, as much as I kind of think the Jeep Renegade, for example, is totes adorbs,
That's the like new long wheelbase pickup one.
No. This is the like basically Fiat 500X derived cute
Yes.
ute.
Yeah.
It looks like a Wrangler. It looks like a Jeep, and it's got some pretty good off-road chops for what it is. But that's a marketing, and I hesitate to use this word stunt, but it's a marketing tool, right? They're taking the Jeep Wrangler image or the Jeep image and applying it to what is effectively only moderately different than every other crossover on the road. And that doesn't appeal to me. But a Wrangler, like, it is what it says it is on the box. It's genuinely a truck.
There's a transparency. There's a direct connection between what it says it is and what it truly is underneath. And the same thing is true about the Land Rover, and the same thing is true about the G, the first generations of all of these things, all of which are kind of disappearing around the same time because we've now just gotten a new Defender and we just got a new G.
Yeah, but the new G is, I think, still really... It's not as honest, but on the honesty scale, it went from a 10 originally, 10 out of 10, to like a 9.7 to like maybe it's a 9.5 now. Because now it's at least a vehicle that's safe to slide around a corner. I mean, the difference in handling between the first G and the current G is like night and day.
Most importantly, how's the door shut noise?
The same.
Good. Okay,
like,
great.
It's so awesome that Mercedes is like one of these companies that totally understands what makes a legend a legend. So like they went so far as to not give it... So it's got remote keyless entry, so you can keep the key in your pocket to like start the car and whatever else. But you can't touch the door handle. To lock the door or unlock it, you have to take the little key fob out and hit the button. And their excuse was we couldn't risk changing the way the doors sound and the door locks sound. And to engineer that, we'd have to engineer a whole new wireless system. So we couldn't do that. So we just kept the old door handles to make sure that it did that like unbelievable prison.
It is really really impactful. It's like very few other things, and it's one of my favorite things about a G.
That we are so
for sure.
weird. Yeah, I agree totally.
But they obviously are on the same page. They knew that it was an important defining characteristic of the product.
Yeah.
So they kept it intact.
But think about it this way: how fucked up is our like billions of dollars a year? Each car company spends billions of dollars developing every single car, and we then focus on. I like the sound of the door lock mechanism. This is so crazy, and I love it. It's cool. I don't think we're wrong. It's definitely one of the defining features of a G class. But like how ironic.
It shows a fundamental understanding of the product and what makes it important, and also the people who buy it and what they value. So I think it's rather clever.
I think it's clever that they're doing it. I just think that it's hilarious that this is what it comes down to. You know, a $5 billion car or something like developed, it costs $5 billion, and we're like, forget about the crash safety, forget about the improved handling, forget about everything. Do the doors make the same noise? Yes? Then it's a success. Objectively, this is a little weird, isn't it?
Oh, many things are objectively weird about being enthusiastic about cars in general. I mean, like the whole to come back to the Jeep thing. Like there is a heritage of that brand that drives people's enthusiasm. I mean, I think it goes back to World War II. You know the story about where the name Jeep came from, right? Or not? Maybe.
Of course I do. But you should tell the audience to make sure that they know it.
So the name Jeep came from because during World War II they were general purpose vehicles, or GP, and everyone called them Jeeps for short because they were sort of just, instead of saying GP you would say Jeep, and so then they just sort of spelled it out, and that's where the origin of the name is. And then there's always, I think it's 7 grill slats because that's what the original ones had, and they still do that today. But yeah, there's my Jeep story.
That's cool. That's why you're going to be called Dittis. Which
Ditz.
is easier than Ditz. Oh, you just gave yourself your new nickname, hyphen. Ditz. That authenticity is what I really like about the Jeep brand. And when you, like, it's really obvious when you go to like a product launch for Jeep, all of the people who are in charge at that company, at that brand within Fiat Chrysler, understand they can't piss off their core enthusiast base. Like everything that has the Jeep logo on it has to be the best off-road vehicle in the class. And they know that you're not going to take a Wrangler, like a typical Jeep Wrangler off-road guy, and put him in a Renegade. Like that's just not, they know that, or Compass. It's not going to happen. But as long as they still make the Wrangler and that truck is 100% true to what it's supposed to be, they can sell the other stuff. And they've managed that brand better than anyone else by understanding, quote,
I think Land Rover has done a very good job of that too. No matter what Land Rover product it is, it's going to be good off-road.
Okay, yes, but I will say there's a lot of controversy right now about some of their current products, right? So you have the Range Rover brand is allowed to be a little bit more fun with the Velar and the Range Rover and all kinds of other stuff. But now you have the new Defender, and people are a little like upset about it. I'm not. I think they're cool.
Why? Because of the aesthetics or because of its capability?
Because it's that is a caricature of what the old Defender was.
I agree with that. I was disappointed when I first saw it. I was appointed when I saw the new G because I was like, oh, they left it really intact. And with the new Defender, I was like, it's not recognizable enough. It doesn't have enough of the aesthetic.
So I think they tried to keep the aesthetic, but what they did in that unfortunate modern way is they made a caricature of it, which is bad enough. But then they forgot what made the Defender what it was, and what made the Defender what it was a simple box shape and a simple ruggedness that was not a luxury car. And the fact that this is now nothing but a reskinned version of their existing cars. It's it's a Velar / Range Rover Sport / whatever else. I don't even know what it is under. I haven't driven one yet. But the fact that they did that is I think a little bit of cause for concern. If the Wrangler became what the Renegade is, for example, a rebodied 500X, G people would go crazy. And I think so. I understand why Land Rover people are like, this new Defender sucks. Even if I look at it, I'm like, it's kind of cute. Like, it's cool and whatever. But
I mean, as a superficial observer and just going on the basis of instinctive reactions, because I haven't spent any time with it, I had the same reaction, which is like, it doesn't have the honesty, the authenticity that I was hoping it would have. Right. Especially after they kept it in production until I think it was 2015 or 2016 that they made the last of the original Defenders. And I mean, those things are just so like agricultural. I mean, that was the intended audience, right? The whole reason the Range Rover came out in 1970, which is hilarious to me because if you look at a 70s Range Rover, it's not at all plush. But compared to a series, I mean everything compared to a series, any chair with upholstery is plush. But the Range Rover was supposed to be the plush sort of car-ish one that still had the capability, but was a little bit more refined and civilized. But yeah, those old Defenders are really. I mean, but that's what makes them charming. That's what attracts people to them. It's the same thing about the Wrangler and how you could take the doors off and stuff.
But see, to me, the Wrangler, I would love to have TJ, one of the last ones with the inline 4-liter, the 4-liter inline 6 and a 5-speed, and I love that you can take the doors off and all the rest of the stuff. But actually, they don't drive well by sort of modern standards, but they're quick.
Of course not.
And they're fun. And I've driven precisely one Defender, and I hated it. Well, two, if you count the Arconic one that we had in the office that does 0 to 60 not. But I just thought they were so truckish and so agricultural that it crossed over to where it wasn't fun anymore.
Yeah, I like them, but not in diesel form. I would need a V8. I don't know. I haven't driven a TD5, but yeah, the V8 ones I find quite usable and enjoyable.
Yeah, probably the one that I drove was some 4-cylinder that had 4.5 horsepower and barely moved and shook the whole car. And I mean, I think there's a definite crossover point where a little bit of misery can be fun.
Oh yes, of course. That's an inherent ingredient in any old car experience.
Is misery?
Yeah. Duh.
Fair enough. I mean, I think modern cars have just become less and less miserable. I think you're right. That's one way of looking at it. Modern cars have done a really good job at sucking the misery out of transport, and therefore injecting gallons of boredom.
But an apocalypse is certainly not boring, which seems to be, well, I don't know. It could happen.
It seems more imminent than ever. I mean, if coronavirus ain't going to get us, we'll be in a civil war in this country very soon. Great. I'm going to be back on a happy thing here. Anyway, let's think about this. Other zombie apocalypse vehicles. So I need to get you into a Suzuki Sidekick. I'll probably do a Sidekick instead of a Samurai. You've never driven anything of the sort, on
never
vacations around the world?
No,
Like a
no.
Jimny,
Oh,
nothing?
I drove a Moke. That was bad.
Okay, I expect that.
It was also like, I don't think it was a mini-based Moke. I think it was like a modern Chinese reproduction Moke.
Yeah.
So that was like just outrageously bad.
I wouldn't expect that to be good. But like the sidekicks and geo-trackers and like whatever else they were called, they're fun. They're genuinely fun. Like I would love to swap a twin cam into one and have a genuinely roarty one. But maybe it's like that. There's no roof and there's no safety and all that. But they're actually not bad little cars to drive.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of, I think that always remains my zombie apocalypse vehicle, except they're fuel injected. So if the zombies
And they have
like
timing belts.
right, and if the zombies have a jammer and can like electronically jam fuel injection, you're stuck. Whereas a carbureted something. Well, you know that like part of a zombie apocalypse is that the electromagnetic interference thing stops all computers and electronic things from working. That's why you have to have a carbureted zombie apocalypse vehicle or a diesel. How do you not know this? This is just a thing.
This is entirely news to me.
Unless it's a thing that I made up.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
There have to have been science fiction, not that I would have ever seen them, science fiction movies about some, electronic interference from the sun shutting all of our computers down. How would we get porn? Oh, God. I don't want a zombie apocalypse vehicle. I want to die if that happens. Trying to keep it positive over here. Yeah. No, I think a carbureted or diesel one. So maybe I'd have to get a Suzuki Samurai. Because the only thing it would have to have would be an ignition source. Like an ignition coil. Mm-hmm. Or diesel.
Yeah, diesel. I think that's the answer.
I mean...
All right.
Or a Lamborghini LM002. Because then I would just run over the fucking zombies.
Yeah, but you would need so much fuel what does that thing have? Like a 50-gallon tank or something like that?
Something like that. Well, some outrageous, whatever.
You would spend so much time fueling it, you wouldn't have time to be running over anyone.
Yeah, but think about what would happen in the interim. Like, you'd be running over all the zombies, A, not feeling them, and B, making Countach V12 noises.
Hard to argue with that.
Like,
speaking of authenticity and military-derived contracts, that's another one of those things. Along with the Hummer H1.
Yeah.
Although, that would be...
Have you ever driven any of the Hummers? Like the real Hummers?
No, I haven't. I'm sure it's terrible. Yeah. It's also like as wide as a city block.
So is an LM002, but yes.
Yeah.
But I'm sure the LM's actually a lot narrower.
I'm also sure of that. Even for the U.S. roads, H1s look really wide.
Yeah. Yeah, like I couldn't bring myself to buy a character like an H3, like any of the caricatures of the sort of disingenuous.
There was, I think, a kind of garbage 5-cylinder gas motor available.
They were 5-cylinder
as well.
Yeah, I worked with a crazy photographer years ago, Britt, who in the economic downturn of 2008, 2009, walked into a Hummer dealer with a cigarette in his hand because he always had a cigarette. He's like, right, man, I'd like to have a Hummer. And they were like, what? He's like, I'm British, I can do this. And they were like, you really not the right time for anyone to be driving a Hummer because, people were irate at them because they were a sign of wretched excess. So he leased this thing for like $179 a month. Like he got rid of his Toyota, I think he had a Toyota Sienna minivan that he used for shooting. And he's like, well, for 1/3 or 1/4 of the price, I can have a Hummer, and because I'm British, I can do it. And this one time he opens the hood because his oil light came on. And he was like, right, I have to check the oil, mate. Oh shit, someone's stolen the spark plug. He had no idea. He was like, where the fuck is the 6th spark plug, mate? And I'm like, there is none. Like, it's not a 5-cylinder. There's no one stupid enough to do that. And I'm like, you're stupid enough to buy a car that has a 5-cylinder, even though 5-cylinders.
I like 5-cylinder motors.
Not that GM 5-cylinder motor.
Oh, yes, of course, no.
Yeah, I love 5-cylinder Audis and VWs and Mercedes.
Volvos.
But yeah, that car.
Oh, that would be another good apocalypse vehicle, the Volvo 240.
I guess so. They do last for a while.
They go on forever and ever. I mean, it's one of those cars, together with the 123, there's certain old cars where when you see one, you're like, oh yes, it's one of those. Whereas like certain other old cars, you see one, you're like, oh my god, I haven't seen one of those in forever.
Or
but
even
still,
better,
like,
what the fuck is that thing doing still running?
Yes,
under
exactly.
its own power?
But if you see an old Volvo 240 or a W123 Mercedes, you're just like, oh yes, another one of those. They're still going, and so it still is a familiar sight to see. And I think that's a very good tell for whether it would be a good zombie apocalypse vehicle. Is if you
don't notice.
If you see one around regularly and you're like, oh yeah, of course, there it is.
Course. Still going.
Existing. Yeah. Still.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing. I mean, because if I do see a 70s Land Rover or Range Rover driving, I'm always surprised that it's not on the bed of a pickup truck.
Or on the side of a road or on a flatbed. Yeah.
Yeah, I typically make some terrible comment like, look, it's moving under its own power. How cute. Or, look, it's broken down and it's coasting to a stop. Or, I'm typically making fun of them because it's so unusual that they're actually moving. Just like when you see like a Chrysler K car, you're like, it didn't rust yet? It's still there? Someone is still putting gasoline in this thing? Why?
I mean, these things happen in California. One of my friends moved here from Michigan, and he was like, I can't believe how nice the cars are and how they still exist. Look at this, a Tercel. I haven't seen one of those in forever, because he's from Michigan. Yeah. When he got here, they're all beautifully preserved structurally. They're all, baked to hell.
Oh, the idea that you can have an Alfa Romeo GTV here that's been literally parked outside for 50 years and doesn't have a spot of rust on it. I mean, it's got no paint left and the dash is cracked and all the rest of the shit. But like the car is salvageable and structurally present is an impossibility to people who live outside of California. So for the first 5 years I lived here, I was like, holy shit, one of those. Holy shit, one of those. Oh my God. And it was just like, and then you find out that they're not only still here, but that they're just street parked in San Francisco.
Yes. There's a lot of weird, obscure stuff just street parked, like DeSotos and 59 Impalas and like
Volkswagen
all kinds of
Squarebacks and like weird stuff that you're like, how did this thing survive? But San Francisco's got an interesting climate because not only does it not really have, certainly no freezing and salt and whatever, but not really crazy levels of humidity, except for areas with fog, but then also no sun. So you don't get that sun-baked, like Reno, Nevada cars that are 3 years old and the headlights are completely destroyed from the sun and the interior has turned to dust. So it's a little harder here to decipher the zombie apocalypse vehicles from the non, because kind of everything lasts forever here.
I mean, cosmetically, the question is, will it go without any maintenance?
Yeah, that's why I think I might have to come back to like one of the Japanese cars. Here's another one that we never talk about: Land Cruisers.
Yes, you're right. We failed to talk about the Land Cruiser on the SUV episode, which was remiss on our parts. But those things are actually what you should have instead of a Land Rover. Everyone in like sub-Saharan Africa, it's kind of like that's the ticket actually. You want it in the sort of NATO configuration in white with steel wheels with the cross on the door so that people don't harass you so much. That's kind of the ideal configuration. But yeah,
maybe a step further than I would have gone, but fair enough.
Well, I don't know. When you're worried about like bribery and like piracy or whatever, carjacking, that's the word I'm looking for.
Well, what's funny is that I always forget about the car, and that's the car that I grew up in. So my dad had a Land Cruiser from 1983 through, this is crazy, we moved from New York to Germany in 1990 and he shipped it over. He took it with us, yeah. And there's a really funny story. So will be a little zombie apocalypse side note here. So we get to Germany, I get home from school one day and hold on, I gotta tell this from my mom's perspective. So we all moved to Germany, none of us speak German. My dad's at work all day and just was like, see ya, bye, and left my poor mother to deal with like two 15-year-olds and like setting up a house. And so everything was a complete disaster. And this one day, somebody rings the doorbell and it's a French guy and he's like, and she was like, sorry, English? And he was like, no. And she's like, can't help you. And she's like, sorry, I don't understand. So she slams the door in his face because New Yorker. And he rings the doorbell back, and she's like, "What? What do you want?" And she's like, I don't know what to say to you. So about 20 minutes later, the doorbell rings again, and it's the police. And they're German, and they're like, "Ja, I can't do it. I can't fake German because
why don't you just speak German then?"
Ja, was? No, I'm not. I'm sure they were very nice about it, but you have to do it like in the sort of like
angry way.
Was tun Sie da? Something of the sort. But they're talking to her in German. And she's like, sorry, English, and they're like 9. And the French guys, and they're like, no, we don't understand. So they all just sat there, and the French guy starts screaming. The cops are one cop is yelling at him. The other one is yelling at my mother in German, not screaming, not angrily, but so like he can speak louder than those other two guys. And they all start looking at each other. They all like look at each other and just start laughing. So this is what's going on at the front door, and she has no idea what's going on or what's going on. So the cops bring her outside. And there is the Land Cruiser has been delivered, and it won't start. So she's like, I don't know what to do, and the cops don't know how to tell her to call like the AAA, German ADAC, which is German German AAA. So they go back inside, and they're all fighting and whatever. And I get off the school bus like 5 blocks away, and I walk over, and there's the Land Cruiser sitting literally in the middle of the street, and there's a line of cars blocking us because it's a one-way street and it's 1 lane wide, and there is this Land Cruiser in the middle of it. And everyone's screaming and everyone's honking, and there's no one around, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? So I get inside, the key's in it, I turn the key, nothing. I open the hood, the battery's not connected, so I connect the battery, and I start it. And I drove it in the driveway, turn it off, and walk in, and I'm like, oh my God, why are there 2 cops and a screaming Frenchman in my house? And my mother's like, Jason, get out of here. And I'm like, Mom, they're the Land Cruiser. I know! I don't know what to do about it. I'm like, well, it's in the driveway now. And she's like, how? And I'm like, well, I just plugged in the battery. What's going on? And so now I had to like try to explain to the cops, like, everything's okay. Hey, French guy, you can leave. It was a complete and total disaster. Not nearly as much of a disaster as what that truck was like to drive on an Autobahn.
Yeah.
You do not want to max out a Land Cruiser at 75 miles an hour, because that's all it did, because it was just terrible anyway.
This is like this is the one that looks kind of like a Range Rover, where it has the lights at the corners and it's round.
Yes.
It's the FJ80 or something like that.
I think it was an 80. It was 1983. So it was the round headlight, brown with like a brown and orange cloth interior, crank windows. But like, this is the car that I effectively grew up in. And my dad had it for years, and I don't think about it because all I remember are all the 700 times our Saab 900 Turbo left us for dead on the side of the road, and I had to spend the rest of the day in a flatbed looking at the Saab bouncing on the flatbed behind us. Like the Toyota, he got 100,000 miles on that thing, my dad, and I remember once the emergency brake cable snapped, so it had no e-brake, and he did hit the garage door with it. And it was a stick. And once the choke cable broke. And I used to go out and start it in the morning. Like if it was really cold, he would drive me and my sister to school. To try to get that carbureted thing to start when it was like, 8 degrees outside without a choke was not quite so easy. But it would always do it. Like the thing about this car is it always started. It never broke. It never gave him any shit. So I don't even think about it.
This sounds like it might be the ideal zombie apocalypse vehicle then.
Getting there. Unless you have to go faster than 70 miles an hour. Because...
I mean, yeah, but are you going to go faster than 75 miles an hour in any of the other things we've just put forth as candidates?
In a new G60 something, G63, yeah.
Yeah, but then that has fuel injection. Maybe in a turbocharged 300 TD, you could do that actually. I had a sedan up to like 85, because it was a car with the 85 mile an hour speedometer, and I maxed the speedometer out, which I was very delighted by, because that's not an occasion you get very often, and so I wanted to capitalize on it. So I did manage after some time to get the speedometer to max.
I don't think you're getting to 85 miles an hour in a 300 GD.
Not in a GG, right. No. In a TD, in a 123, yeah.
In a 123, yeah. Sorry. I thought you were still talking about G's, and I'm like, it's going to take a little more than 120 horsepower to get you over 80 miles an hour on that thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, maybe... and did I just hear correctly? I'm sorry to do this to you while we're recording. Did you just buy another 124?
I would do...
You have 3 V8 Mercedes E-Classes, don't you?
Yes. The answer you're looking for is yes.
I mean, would you care to? So for those who can't keep track of your hoarding, you have a 500E, right? And then you have an E500 Wagon, super cool. And now you bought a 400E?
I did buy a 400E.
Okay, why?
It's a Diet 500E.
It's a diet. reduced calorie 500e.
It's literally an order of magnitude. So what happens is that I don't drive my 500e because it's like valuable enough now that I probably drive it 20% as much as I want to, because it's like they've gotten kind of valuable. The first one I bought was $11,000, and like now they're a lot more expensive than that. And so I miss the experience of interacting with the 124 because I think those cars are wonderful. And so in the 400, it's like a lot less expensive and you get a substantially similar experience. Although it has really different gearing, and this car, more than anything else I've owned, has taught me how impactful gearing is, rear end ratio. Like the car turns 1,000 RPM less on the highway at 80 miles an hour than the 500.
Right, and it's got a lot less power to begin with, so.
It's still pretty snappy because what it'll do is it'll downshift into third gear at a speed that the 500 never would because of the rear end ratio. Okay. So it doesn't feel that much slower. I mean, it is appreciably slower, but it's not like unusable because you're just in one gear lower.
I think we're gonna have to do an episode on your V8 Mercedes fetish.
No, nobody cares except for me.
I mean, look, I will make fun of you to the point that it will be funny. Or at least humiliating for you, which will then be funny to some people. The only V8s I've ever owned are Mercedes. 6.9 and a C43 AMG. The only cars with V8s I've ever had. So clearly there's a Mercedes V8 thing happening between the two of us. I'm sure you've had plenty of other V8s, but I don't.
Yeah, I had the Cayenne and the Range Rover were V8s.
I don't really like cars that have two cylinder heads. Hold on, I have the Ferrari. I can't believe I just forgot about that. And you forgot about that one.
I forgot about it too, and I used to own that car.
But I think when I think of V8, when I say the words V8, I'm thinking of lumpy cross
Right, yeah, and that thing just sounds like a four-cylinder, so you forget that it's a V8.
It was only once I'm like, oh fuck, one day if I ever have to pull a head off of that car, to pull a head off of a 308 engine will take longer than to die in a zombie apocalypse. Like I've heard all kinds of horror stories, so I'm really scared about that. Anyway.
So not the ideal zombie apocalypse vehicle.
The Ferrari? No. No. Certainly not any of the modern stuff either. Like so fast in a straight line until you have to come to a complete stop and lift the car up manually to go over a speed bump. Like cars with...
Or a zombie corpse. Well, if you don't care about the front bumper, then...
Yeah, but you know what? Invariably something you'll hit the zombie corpse and it'll puncture the radiator and you're over. Like, the things we learned from watching demolition derbies is, if the radiator is sticking out in front of the front bumper, you're not going to be racing for very long.
Really?
Yeah. Like, I think the worst car you could ever do, like, here's a zombie apocalypse car that sounds like it would be good, but isn't. Like an Audi 4000. It's four-wheel drive. It's got a little bit of ground clearance. Those things will, that simple, wonderful all-wheel drive system is so good for putting power to the ground that every time we used to go out and like in the snow, and my friends in their lifted Jeeps and their lifted like actual shit would get stuck, and every time we'd pull them out with an Audi 4000.
He got stuck again. You dumb fuck. Y'all are stuck again?
Hey, yank on me real quick.
JV, make sure you don't go too far back because you're heading into a bank.
You're gonna want to kind of go that way. The fucking Audi pulls me out. That's awesome.
The problem with an Audi 4000 is the Audi layout, which means that the entire engine is completely and totally in front of the front wheels.
Yes, and it's an inline 5.
So it's long. And the best part about that car was the thing aside from the bumper that was the furthest forward of any other thing in the car was the lower belt pulley. So you hit a snowbank and it would throw the fan belt off. Luckily not the timing belt because my buddy left the cover on it. But it would be always the same thing, like, oh, making all this great noise and poof, and temperature would go up because it would throw the water pump pulley, belt off. Like,
'Cause,
so it's
yeah.
just, yeah, those cars are like, they're unstoppable until a fly hits the front of the car and throws the belt. It's always the strangest little things that kill cars.
So not that.
Not that.
So yeah, now this is an important, actionable information for our watchers after this week's episode. And now,
When picking a zombie apocalypse vehicle, remember that it has diminishing value if it has a timing belt. Peak zombie apocalyptic value occurs directly after a belt service,
yes.
and then dwindles. That's
Well, you're welcome.
Thank you.
We added a lot of
Thank
value.
you for this. And go for the diesel because it doesn't need a spark ignition to work. Worst case, you could
Except for
push it.
at the beginning.
Well, you just push it down the street. Oh, glow plugs? Nah, push it down a big enough hill. We live in San Francisco.
Long enough hill.
Yeah. You just keep it spinning long enough until it, heats the mixture. You could do it without glow plugs. All right, so live in somewhere that's warm and hilly. Park it at the top of a hill.
Turn twice to the left.
Right. And cough, and then you'll be fine. Yeah. Okay. This was an easy episode. We're done.
Cool.
You don't look satisfied by this. No. Fine. All right. Then I'm going to do one last thing. Is I'm going to plug our T-shirts. I am not wearing an ISSIMI T-shirt, but I have one right here. This is the most amazing T-shirt of all time because it's my Lotus, and it says "I hate everyone." And by the way, that means equally. And this is a fun T-shirt that we now have for sale. There, we'll have a link below. Some people can see like a whole list of the ISSIMI T-shirt store, but we have a bunch of really funny T-shirts, all car related, including Derek's Mura up on blocks on a lawn because it's hilarious. So go buy some T-shirts because what else are you going to do with your money right now? It's not like you can spend it on your car and go anywhere. We're still in lockdown.
Hilarious for everyone else. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yep.
And something bumper at the end of this also.
Oh, I did one. I did one while you were setting up your camera. I
Oh,
told everyone to go
great.
like and subscribe and stuff. So we'll just put that in. How about
Well,
that?
I'll see myself out.
All right.
in
Then
that case.
fare thee well. If you enjoyed the Carmudgeon Show, make sure you subscribe to the ISSIMI YouTube channel and click that notification bell to make sure you're told every time we publish something amazing, which is basically every time we publish anything. Are we done yet?